Hey guys, how are you doing? Hope you all are doing well. Hope you've had a great holiday with your friends and family. Top 7 games of 2021. Let's go! Okay, so before the start of this year, I have not played a lot of Mario Party. I had very light experience with some of the older games in the franchise, but most of my time with the series was spent on Super Mario Party, which was okay, I guess. Could be worse, but earlier this year, I decided to play a lot of the older Mario Parties with my friends. We played some of the games on the N64, and we played a good amount of the GameCube titles as well, with Mario Party 6 being my personal favorite. So that's why I was so pleasantly surprised to hear Nintendo was making a remaster of sorts with Mario Party Superstars, a game that remade maps from 1 through 3, and remade minigames from 1 through 10. And god, this game has been such a blast. This game finally goes back to the formula that people love about this franchise so much. It doesn't have really any of the stupid gimmick-based minigames. It makes the stars 20 coins again, which makes it actually challenging to afford a star at all times, and a bunch of other improvements that I really like. However, one of the biggest issues with Mario Party is being able to meet up with your friends in person and play. No matter if it's the issue of actually getting all your friends in one room to actually sit down and play, having enough controllers for all your friends to play, and a bunch of other stuff that just makes playing an actual game of Mario Party really hard to do. But that is no longer an issue with Superstars with the new online. And yeah, I know they did add this to Super Mario Party earlier this year with an update, but one, who wants to play Super Mario Party when Mario Party Superstars is out? And two, Super's online really wasn't that great, all things considered, that Superstars fix. Some of the issues with Super Mario Party's online included if a player lost connection, the game would simply end. No matter if that was internet going out or a rage quit, it ended the fun for everyone. However, in Superstars, if a player drops out, they are immediately replaced with the CPU, which resolves two issues. If it was a situation that the player dropped out because of internet issues, you can pause the game, save it, and back out so you can re-add the friend to the party, and then you can rejoin the game and continue from where you guys left off. However, another issue that is actually pretty common if you're playing with randoms is that people rage quit at Mario Party a lot. So being able to replace those rage quitters with CPUs so you can at least go on and finish the game is a really good fix. Another thing I think is really great with Mario Party Superstars is the minigame selection. I would say out of all the minigames, I'd say about 95% of them are fantastic with a few odd picks. Like Tug of War was a really odd pick to bring back, and honestly it terrifies me when it comes up because I don't want to get Joy-Con drift, so I end up just not playing the minigame and losing. And it also terrifies me when I'm playing locally with friends because usually I'm the one handing out my controllers, and it makes me terrified for all of my controllers. But a lot of these minigames are fantastic. My personal favorite minigame of all the Mario Parties is Snowworld from Mario Party 6. It is a pure skill-based minigame and is super fun and really fast-paced. There was genuinely one night that me and my friends all met up to play Mario Party, and we ended up just going to Minigame Island and just playing Snowworld over and over for an hour or two. And we were all sharing strategies on how to get the better score, using different controllers, using different methods of how we pressed all the buttons. It was just a lot of fun. Really, the only issue I have with Mario Party Superstars is the fact that there's only 5 boards. Which, I mean, it could be worse, but it really does feel like we're playing the same boards over and over all the time. I really feel like if they added 2 or 3 more boards, this would be no issue at all. So it'd be really cool to see DLC for them adding maybe a couple GameCube maps and possibly more characters, because actually the roster of this game did get cut down a lot. I don't know, I think the issues with this game are all fixable with DLC, and I would love to see it. Persona 5 Strikers was a game I never asked to exist, but I am so happy it does. This game acts as a direct sequel to 2017's Persona 5 with a completely new battle system. This game was developed by Koei Tecmo, the team behind Dynasty Warriors and Hyrule Warriors. This did make me a little cautious going into this game, as those games end up being pretty button mashy and very light on story, but all my worries were put to rest when I finally got my hands on Persona 5 Strikers. The combat is actually pretty different from the usual Dynasty Warrior format and actually uses a lot of elements from the Persona games. I feel like compared to the other Warriors games, this game uses a lot more strategy and is actually a lot more challenging too. And I had a blast playing through the game. I thought the gameplay was great, and another great thing about this game is that you have the entire cast from the start. No more having Haru in the last 10 hours of the game, no more getting characters later. Within the first couple hours of the game, you have the entire party playable. I didn't even get to talk about the story yet, which honestly is fantastic. All the original voice actors from the base game are back and reprising their roles. And the writing for the game is fantastic. When you usually think of Persona spin-offs, you usually think of Persona 4 Arena and the dancing games, which usually are not the best writing-wise. However, this is one of the first Persona spin-offs that actually have a pretty great story. And the new characters that are introduced in this game too are fantastic. We have Sophia, Zenkichi, and Akane, just to name a couple of them, and they are all fantastic characters. This game kind of acts as a road trip while the Phantom Thieves are going out after these jails, trying to figure out what's causing them, who's causing them, and trying to get these jails to stop being a thing. There's a lot more to the story, and that was a very, very simplified version of it. But I do highly suggest checking out this game if you are a Persona fan. However, I would say stay away until you have played base Persona 5, because the game does really heavily rely on your knowledge of what happened in the story of Persona 5. But I had a great time with this game. It really surprised me, and I'm really happy it ended up being as good as it was. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, we finally got a new entry in the mainline Metroid franchise with Metroid Dread. Now, I'm going to be entirely honest with you all. I've never been the biggest fan of the Metroid franchise, nor Metroidvanias as a genre. But after Dread's announcement at E3 2021, I decided it was finally time to give this series a full chance. And I decided to sit down and play every mainline game in the series leading up to Dread. I started with Zero Mission, and everything immediately clicked for me. And I enjoyed it so much, I played through Samus Returns, Super Metroid, and Metroid Fusion, all in the span of a couple weeks right before Dread. So I went into this game fully caught up on how the series has advanced. And wow, for the first time returning to a fully original Metroid title in so long, Metroid Dread is fantastic. The level design is great and the combat just feels wonderful. The game was developed by Mercury Steam, the devs behind Metroid Samus Returns on 3DS. The game mostly follows a similar kind of formula, but it works so much better on Switch with twin-stick controls. I also feel like the new power-ups are great and have a lot of satisfaction behind them, no matter if you're using them to defeat enemies or solving puzzles. But for me, the main highlight of this game was the Emmy segments. In these segments, you have to dash through sections where Emmys will chase you until you finally find a power-up that will give you the ability to destroy it. These sections are super intense and usually end with a lot of trial and error, but once you figure out how to get around the Emmy and how to destroy it, it is so satisfying to complete. No matter if this is your first Metroid game or you're a longtime fan, Metroid Dread is amazing and I highly suggest you try it out. I never thought a sequel to 2007's The World Ends With You would get a sequel in 2021, but here we are. My prior experience with the franchise was lacking to say the least. I picked up the final mixed release of the original game on Nintendo Switch, and I really did not enjoy it due to the touch controls and pretty bad gyro controls. However, the one thing I enjoyed the most about the game was the writing and the plot. So even though I never finished the original game, seeing the game get a sequel that removes everything I didn't like about the first game and keeping everything I did really like about the old game, it made me buy the game at launch. And man, I am so glad I did. Neo The World Ends With You was probably the biggest surprise in 2021 for me. The writing in the story is as great as ever with some fantastic characters. Rindo, Fret, and Nagi are such a great cast of starting characters, and it's so fun to see these characters all evolve and develop throughout the story. The game features a lot of new characters too, but also features a lot of returning characters from the original game, that I'm sure fans will enjoy seeing them in a new title. And watching the plot unfold throughout the multiple weeks of the Reapers game is incredibly engaging, and will keep you entertained until the very end. The combat is super satisfying and fun too. It uses the base of the old battle system with the pin system, but instead of being a touch and swipe action game, it's more of a real-time action RPG. Each pin ends up getting assigned to a specific button, and when you press that button, that character attacks. And you're able to mix it up so one button controls all the characters, or all 3 characters are controlled between different buttons. You have a lot of customization with combat, and it makes it never feel stale as you're always throwing out different attacks depending on your pins. And honestly, I had so much fun with the combat. There was one point that I just sat and decided to go through every area in the game and defeat every enemy that I could. And me doing that made me super over-leveled for the next couple days in the game. It honestly was just so much fun that I really didn't even realize I was grinding. I was just having fun and playing the game as I wanted to. I very highly suggest you guys check out Neo: The Worlds of You. It's one of my favorite games I've played this year, and I'm actually really wanting to play it again. After last year's Marvel's Avengers released with a lot of negative feedback, it was fair to be cautious going into Square Enix's second outing with a Marvel IP, being Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. However, this game is so much better in just about every way, and honestly, the highs of this game go as high as Insomniac's Spider-Man. First off, the writing of this game is really good. Like, really good. There are so many times that I was just surprised that James Gunn didn't write this game himself because, wow, they matched the writing of the Guardians films so perfectly. The story follows the Guardians a bit after them forming the team, while they still have a lot of issues with each other. Drax doesn't trust Gamora as she is the daughter of Thanos, and Rocket is constantly fighting with Star-Lord. It's really fun to see these characters develop from the start of their adventure going all the way to the end. The combat in this game is also really good. You play as Star-Lord for the entire game, but he is so much fun to play. And honestly, a lot of the combat resembles last year's Final Fantasy VII Remake with a stagger system and being mostly an action game. Star-Lord has the ability to both use melee attacks and also distance attacks with his blaster. Throughout the game, you unlock more moves for yourself and your teammates, which makes combat even more interesting. But what really ties this game together is the music in the background being that 70s to 80s tunes that you're used to with the Guardians franchise. Right before writing this section of my Game of the Year list, I actually did just beat the game. And I remember one of the final segments of the game involved the Guardians all walking out to fight this boss, and in the background, you're listening to Queen's The Final Countdown. And it's just something that no other game really has done. And it's just something special that just you don't see very often. It was so cool. The game is pretty beefy too. It took me around 20 hours to complete the main game, but that was also with me taking my time searching around for tools to upgrade my guns, and also just taking in the environment too. This game is really pretty. There's a lot of points where they'll have you look off a mountain just to kind of look at the scenery, and it's a clear reason why, because the scenery in this game looks amazing. My real only complaint with this game is that nearing the end of the game, there were quite a big number of bugs. And I actually did post a number of them on my Twitter, but it was all visual stuff. It never was anything that hindered progress. It is just stuff that I feel needs to be updated and could probably pretty easily be fixed. But like I said, it didn't make the experience to a point that I had less fun. Overall, Guardians of the Galaxy is a super fun time that I recommend you guys check out. Nier Replicant is such a wonderful game, and I am so glad that I have an excuse to talk about this game finally on the channel. Nier Replicant acts as a semi-remake, semi-reimagining of the original Nier game, with a lot of stuff that actually never came to the American release. The story in the original version in America was actually pretty different, with instead of it being a brother and sister, the original game was a father and a daughter. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the characters. I really love the characters of this game. Nier himself, the main character, is fantastic through both part 1 and part 2 of this game. Grimoire Weiss is one of my favorite companion characters by far. His writing was just great throughout the entire game, and he has some great interactions with the other characters. Kane is such a badass in this game, and her backstory is so incredibly written. And Emil is one of my favorite characters in this entire franchise. He's also one of the only characters that is also in Nier Automata, which, if you guys did that side quest in Nier Automata, you might want to check out Nier Replicant because you get kind of the full story of that entire side quest. And there's a lot of other characters too, and other developments of these characters that I would love to talk about more, but we don't have time, and also a lot of it would be spoilers, so I might have to do a separate video on Nier Replicant at some point. But also, another thing that makes these characters so likable is how great the voice acting is, which has also been great in pretty much every Nier game that I've seen so far. But the biggest upgrade from Nier Automata is the combat. And this might be a little bit of a controversial opinion, and I know that a lot of people don't agree with me, but my biggest issue with Nier Automata was how cramped the controls felt. There was a lot of times where, to be most efficient, you needed to press so many different buttons on the controller, while still awkwardly using your thumbs to move around and control the camera while attacking. And it ended up making my hands feel so cramped that it literally hurt to play Nier Automata at some points. And that was actually the main reason why I bought Nier Replicant on PC specifically, was because I wanted to use Steam to customize controls if needed. But thankfully, it never came to that. Nier Replicant has a much better system on how to customize controls with Vice's abilities. So this game was a lot more comfortable to play and a lot more fun for me to play. That's the biggest reason why I do prefer this game over Automata. And also for a remaster, wow, this game looks great. Comparing it to the original game, it is night and day. Exploring the environments too, with the music in the background too. Oh my god, the music in this game is so good. One of the first songs that comes to mind is the song that one of the twins sing in Nier's village, and it's a song that evolves throughout the game that eventually does become a boss theme at some point. There's a lot of new content added into Replicant, including an entirely new ending that was not in any version of the previous Nier game. And man, this ending feels like the main conclusion to the story that the game was originally missing. I could go on and on, but to summarize, Nier Replicant is amazing, and I highly suggest checking it out. In late October, I went to my local Best Buy looking for a new game to play. I first browsed the Switch section and nothing really caught my eye. I then moved my attention over to the PlayStation aisle, and my eye came across a game that I heard a few people talk about on Twitter, but nothing else. Never did I expect that game to become my game of the year, but here we are. That game was Tales of Arise. My experience with the Tales franchise is limited to the opening hours of Tales of Symphonia and a good chunk of Tales of Vesperia, neither of which stood out enough to me to actually finish. So my expectations going into Arise were pretty low, but oh my god, this game was so good! The story follows two characters being Alphen and Xion, as they go across the lands of Dana to defeat evil Renin lords. These Renin lords are enslaving the race of Dana. Throughout the story, you will meet other characters who will join your cause, such as Rinwell and Law. And there's other characters that are really incredible and I really want to talk about, but I want to keep them a secret for people who check out this game. The story and the writing is really good, and honestly that would have been enough to draw me into the game alone. But then I got to the combat. Instead of the 3D fighting styled combat of previous titles, the new combat feels a lot more closer to an action RPG in the vein of Final Fantasy VII Remake. And wow, this is so much more satisfying to me. Each character in the party is playable too, with each having their own unique abilities. Alphen is a sword user, and Xion is a sharpshooter, Rinwell is a magic user, and Law uses fighting techniques. Each of these styles make each character feel incredibly unique and really varies the combat. You are also able to command your party members, being able to tell them to use which attacks when, and you're able to set up combos. It's a lot, and it makes a lot more sense when you're playing the game, but it's so satisfying, and it was so enjoyable from start to end. However, something I really liked about this game is between combat you're able to take rest, and this gives you the opportunity to talk to your party. They did this in past Tales titles, but I feel like it's a lot better here in Arise, simply because they're not limited to just facial portraits. They are now using the full body of the 3D model and using those to pose all of these conversations. And it gives so much more character to these conversations and makes them a lot more engaging. There's so much more I would love to say about this game, to the point that I really should also make a one-off video for this game. But I'm incredibly surprised that random game I bought one day at Best Buy, knowing basically nothing about it, ended up being my game of the year. What was your guys' game of the year though? Drop that in the comments below. I would really appreciate it. And I don't know if I'm going to get another video out before the end of the year, so this is very likely my last video of the year. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. See you guys next time.